Hi, this is Ian McKell with Infinite A Industries, and I'm your principal engineer. And today we are going to discuss our history of modern research in the Agentic era. And we will share insights concerning designing applications for the Agentic era of design. So we will discuss a lot of research that went into ultimately the design of human AIOS and what we felt was the emerging and predicted manifestation of best practices around human AI collaborative workflows. Next, outside of just human AI collaboration, we studied multimodal interactions and the biography, the biography of the pixel by the co-founder of Pixar is a great example of looking at the digital medium and recreating realistic experiences utilizing something as abstract as a pixel. And so if you think about Pixar movies, they're very extremely immersive and they have a sense of realism. And it is really just through the manipulation of a digital representation of the pixel. And so that always resonated with us concerning how we could utilize digital representations in order to enhance understanding between AI and humans, but also increase that trust factor and the accuracy of digital representations. Next, we studied accessibility, and here is a a business case where you have an industrial design engineering firm that is creating tools, DIY tools, power tools particularly, and they want them to be accessible. They have a market for older generations. And the main point is moving from a thought process of individuals that need accessibility options as being those who are in the minority, the small minority, often. And this business case essentially switches it to where they're considering accessibility populations as a go to market opportunity. And they're looking at this specific segment of the population also as a low hanging fruit, where if you and integrate their considerations at the very beginning, then you're able to benefit when you go to market, and you don't necessarily have to segment them off in the future when you iterate on your product, because you natively integrate and think about that population when you're creating the product from inception. And so that's the differentiation. Instead of catering for previously thought marginalized populations and catering to them after the fact, why not cater to them at the kernel creation of your product? Next, we dived even deeper into productized user interface design. And Apple is always at the top of the list when considering beautiful or gold standards for interface design. And so we went back and we studied the interface guidelines and what really started to differentiate Apple from other ecosystems like PCs, etc. And what we found was that it really was being able to control their own ecosystem, being able to control the continuity of that ecosystem, and having a full stack help them to create a unified customer experience. We have different elements that we looked at in order to determine what this next phase of human AI interactivity would look like and what would be the mediums, what would be the substrates that or where that communication would take place. So we looked at natural language processing, we looked at speech synthesis, which is essentially using voice mode with AI. And we looked at the multimodal interactions, such as through different sensors and through computer vision primarily. Of course, the challenges were accuracy and reliability. They also were privacy and security. Contextual understanding still was a high priority. Bias and fairness was also a factor. And then for future directions, we decided that the missing element wasn't necessarily creating substrates and networks where AI can be successful, but making sure that we didn't go too far down the rabbit hole and not create applications or frameworks that benefited humans, which all of this really ultimately is for. And so, human centered design was an area that we wanted to dive into next. We've been creating and adhering to human centered design best practices for over a decade, but we wanted to update our skill sets in this area. And so we went and got a certification for people centered design. And this is critical in business and engineering. I believe that it's not discussed as much as it should be in startup circles. I think that's a big piece of finding product market fit is ensuring that you do have that people centered design methodology integrated into your discovery process. Additionally, the lean business development process and methodology is not a one-to-one replacement for people-centered design. They are different. One dives deeper into the social and psychological dynamics of what actually is the innate motivation behind a decision or a product purchase. And then last, we gain contextual understanding through interacting with people in a way that AI cannot, just purely through digital means, as there's plenty of context that the AI just won't understand. It could be cultural context, it could be geographic context, it could be context that occurred before the AI was actually created or trained. So there are a number of different considerations. So we'll just touch on our design principles. So we have 8 design best practices that are optimized for Web 4, Web 5 environments. Web 4 is essentially the hybrid quantum integrations, where you start taking quantum algorithms and applying them in new ways on classical systems. And then Web 5 is essentially our holographic internet, where spatial representation is primary. And so, talking about the 8 principles specifically, we want to make sure that applications we create are secure. We want to make sure that they are fast, meaning there's low latency. We want to make sure that they're singular, meaning that each of the applications does something really well. We want to make sure that there's purpose, that there aren't any applications that are created and they don't have utility. Accessible. Once again, we talked about that. We want to make sure that accessibility is something that's first class on our sites. Also, flexible. We want to make sure that there's some adaptability, and that is something that you'll see coming to maturation through our browser based operating system with Human AI OS, where we want to make sure that you can run our software wherever you are or whatever device you're on. Familiar, utilize common design patterns. As you'll see, the Human AI operating system doesn't try to get you to do things that you're not already used to. You'll see the launcher for different apps. It's very similar to other menu keys or buttons on other operating systems, where we're not trying to get the user to do something that they're not already used to, or to reinvent or alter their habits. We understand that man is a creature of habit. And so we attempted to design within those constraints in order to enhance the overall usability of the operating system. And then low maintenance. And you'll see that in a lot of our work as of late. And some people may say, well, why are they so particular about enhancing and optimizing the accuracy of code and AI outputs and AI interactions? And that's just something that was already baked into our design principles from our prior experiences and prior decade. And all of this is encapsulated and became Infinite JS, which is our JavaScript framework. And so this matured into a holographic web design where we completely removed hardware constraints because we can operate on any hardware. We remove compute bottleneck constraints by going to spatial representation, where this representation does not try to mimic all of reality. And it doesn't need special hardware. It works within the constraints of whatever computing paradigm you're operating on. And we talk about that spatial data representation being something that allows AI to be more readily understood, because the data representations are richer than if you were just working with 2 dimensions. This is an example of when we were taking all of our design principles and everything that we've accumulated up to this point and applying it. And this was done through Ubuntu. We created a GNOME wrapper, essentially. And this wrapper took over our user interface on Ubuntu and created a holographic interface. It was something that we loved and were inspired by, yet we wanted something that gave us more control. And the installation process of Ubuntu has always been a huge factor that has inhibited its adoption on a wider level. So we wanted something that was narrow, more narrow than Ubuntu is. We didn't really want something that we were able to integrate a terminal. We just wanted the utility of the terminal, which is primarily being able to get data and outputs. We could handle inputs in a more sterile way. So that kind of gives you an idea about that. And then the actual end result you can see is human AIOS. And you'll see some similarities to human AIOS as it exists today in comparison to about 6 months ago when we first created the Ubuntu wrapper with GNOME for a holographic theme. And so you see that idea, that research that has taken 5 years at least has come to fruition in a very novel and unique way. And so this gives you an idea um, about how we sought out to create a application and an operating system that was first class for those that need accessibility options, that modularity was a core aspect, that spatial cognition and spatial interactions were critical for offloading any cognitive burdens as it relates to communication between AI and humans. And then also, we wanted to ensure that we created a deterministic design, ensuring that this deterministic design makes it so that we address the trust gap that we discovered so many years ago through our research as being one of the core barriers between human and AI collaboration, as well as AI societal adoption overall. Thank you. You guys have been great. I hope this was helpful to you and brings greater understanding concerning our intentions behind human AIOS and our research and the various years worth of decision making that went into creating this product for for industry.